he's definitely seemed to be a little bit quieter, having a harder time speaking. So I think this certainly was, something that a lot of people were watching and worried about for sure.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by Congressional Reporter Samantha-Jo Roth. Samantha, there's been a little bit of a scare in the Senate this week with Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. What happened and what are people saying?
Well, it was definitely a scare for all of us who were watching. He just froze in the middle of his press conference. I mean, nobody knows really what exactly that was. A lot of people were saying, was that a mini stroke? What was that? But, regardless of what we saw, the Senate Minority Leader has been having a really hard time since that fall that he had, and he suffered a concussion. So, he's definitely seemed to be a little bit quieter, having a harder time speaking. So I think this certainly was, something that a lot of people were watching and worried about for sure.
And he'd been missing from the Senate for a while after he had the fall, and now there's been talk of perhaps there being other falls that people have witnessed.
Yeah, that was something that came out overnight. So it is, I think a lot of the Republican senators, at least, they really don't, want to say it's a problem at this time. They want to project strength, but I mean, I think behind the scenes, a lot of folks are wondering what is going on with the Senate Minority Leader's health. He was able to get back up and, answer questions. He was on the floor of the Senate. So, a lot of folks are, on the side of the Senate Minority Leader saying, oh, he's, doing okay.
Right.
But certainly this was the first real, display of, problematic, health issues maybe impacting him.
I mean, McConnell is over 80. He doesn't have a very good relationship currently with former President Trump, who is now the front runner for the Republican presidential nomination in 2024. Are there whispers about maybe McConnell's tenure? I mean, it's been a pretty well-regarded tenure, but maybe it coming to an end?
I personally really haven't heard that just yet. I think it certainly is something behind the scenes that he might be thinking about. A lot of folks are looking at, for example, what's happening with Dianne Feinstein, who, was missing and who has been visibly unable to answer questions, and really looking at that as a cautionary tale, that they don't want their legacy to turn out like hers. So I certainly think that this is something that a lot of Republicans behind the scenes are looking at right now.
And I mean, the Democrats in the House just did generational change in terms of their leadership. They had a lot of leaders who were 80 and up, and now they don't, although Nancy Pelosi was still pretty sharp at the end of her speakership. So maybe that could be something Senate Republicans look at least at some point.
I think it definitely is a consideration for them, but I think at this point they're not ready to publicly say it. So certainly behind the scenes, I think there are a lot of folks, especially Republicans, who want to see a new generation of younger, more energetic Republicans replacing some of these, older ones. There certainly is talk about that, but I think right now publicly a lot of them are staying really silent.
Right. I mean, you're here to be a younger replacement of old people like me. So,
no, not necessarily.
Not necessarily. So there's one area where Senate Republicans have diverged a little bit from House Republicans, and that's been a willingness to support some Biden administration initiatives, some legislation backed by the White House. And you've talked to some Republican senators who've ended up voting for bills that were really pretty important to the case Joe Biden is making for his reelection.
Right. There are a number of Senate Republicans who have supported both of these bills. We're talking about the infrastructure and the CHIPS Act. These were two really critical pieces of legislation. And, I talked to a lot of them, asking them, this is a platform that the president is using for his reelection campaign. and if they regretted some of their votes. And of course,
Sure.
almost all of them had said that they stand by their votes. They talked about the importance of bipartisanship and being able to do things. And some of them are a little frustrated that, that the president is taking total
Credit.
yeah, absolutely credit for it, especially some of these senators who, were key architects and negotiators in it. So that certainly is something that they're a little frustrated with. But overall, I will say that most of them are standing by those votes, and they feel good about, the work that they were able to achieve across the aisle.
Because on the other hand, the White House, and particularly the president himself, likes to point out Republican lawmakers who voted against some of these bills and then are seen as boasting or trying to associate themselves with projects being funded in their states or districts.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly something that they are pointing out, and it's a fair game for them to do that. It's also interesting when you talk to Republicans who did not vote for either one of these bills. And, I spoke with Senator Mike Rounds, who didn't, and he said he doesn't have really any malice against these Republicans who did it. Obviously, that's a very diplomatic answer. It's
Sure.
saying, everyone has different reasons for why they vote for things and why they don't. But even some Republicans who didn't vote for these, are standing by some of their colleagues who did.
So there's one person in the Senate who really has had the spotlight shown on them lately, and that's Senator Tommy Tuberville. And there's been this big stalemate over the Pentagon's abortion policy and the pace at which promotions and confirmations can go forth. Is there any light at the end of the tunnel there?
For now, it really doesn't seem like it. There is a group of bipartisan senators who are looking to find some path forward, but it doesn't sound that optimistic. They really want to tone down pieces of the Pentagon's policy. It's even unclear if Democrats or the Pentagon would be up for this.
Right.
And as some Democrats said last night on the Senate floor, the Alabama senator keeps kind of changing what exactly he wants. There was at one point when he said he wanted it to be an amendment in the NDAA. Then he said he wouldn't support that. There's just a lot of instances of him trying to, come to a conclusion, talking to the defense secretary.
Right.
After that conversation, that was not the solution. So it does seem to be they are at a stalemate, and there are a couple options. The Senate Majority Leader could decide to advance each nomination one by one. As we know, that will eat up a ton of Senate floor time. And
Right.
I think the Senate Majority Leader looks at that as a concession, saying that you can do this. And he does not want to send that message. There's also been talk about, making senators stay over the August recess. That's not going to happen. Sources have told me, a lot of these senators have very busy schedules over the August recess, and that would just be very
And some of
detrimental.
them are running for re-election.
Absolutely, it's a time for them to fundraise, meet with their constituents. So this really isn't an option either. So it really, I wish I could tell you there's a
Right.
solution in sight. We've been talking about this since March, but for now, no, there is not a solution.
Football coaches don't want the other side to see what's inside their playbook.
True, he's very much doing that.
Thank you, SJ. You can read Samantha-Jo and the rest of our congressional team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.